I just started it.
Hey, the noise control. Krip Hop Nation, that's Rob, the noise table from Krip Hop Nation and the Sugar Hill Gang. Remember them? No, because you're too young. 1979. So today, Krip Hop wants to go to the movies without the popcorn. Because it's called critiquing the movies. When it deals with disability, race, and poverty. So this big time movie came out with Kevin Hart in the lead actor of Breaking Bad. You remember Breaking Bad? With the father and the family making or coke or some kind of drug. But anyway, the father figure Brian Cranston is in this movie. It's a remake of Untouchable from 2012. So we're going to talk about this movie because it has really bad things in it that the disability community is not talking about. Of course, they're talking about Brian not being disabled, so it takes away from the real disabled actor. But there's more to it. So I'm gonna call up my sister because we went to go see the original Untouchable in San Francisco, and we were shocked. We were like, "What the?" So Tiny, come on up. Welcome to Krip Hop Radio.
Yeah, Rob the Noise. Keith Jones, how you doing, bruh?
Yeah, so Tiny, we went to go see the original. It came out in 2012, Untouchable. And, we sat in our, theater waiting for the movie. And when it started, it was like, oh my God. And I have to tell you that this movie won the Oscars in Paris.
Yeah.
So Tiny, to talk about it.
Yeah, so, my brother Leroy sometimes acts like everybody knows what he's talking about because he's so scholarly we don't all know. But just to back up a little bit, this movie is actually about, it's the classic Winnie the Pooh and Piglet story of the broke ghetto. In the case of France, the immigrant, the holy immigrant, who comes from nothing and has no real scholarship and is just desperate for change and for money, and that's it. And he gets a break because, oh my God, he got a job with a rich white wealth hoarder, and everything's going to change for him, and they're going to go into the sunset holding each other's hands, and life will be good now, right? And anyway, that story that's been told a million times, going back to Dickens, right? It was very Dickensian in that, like, let's throw the poor people a crumb BS. And yeah, it was terrifying. For us, it was like a horror movie because several reasons. The disabled white wealth hoarder, right? DWWH. The disabled white wealth hoarder, who's grumpy and tired of life and his extreme wealth in his chair. And, he was changed by, I think your story, you said the magical Negro, right? Yeah. The beautiful, poor guy, Piglet, you know what I mean? And the kind of the sad crazy layers and layers of that BS, of that Dickens lie that tripped us up as well was the idea that, you know, the brother had no agency. You know, he had no knowledge of his own. He had no wealth, considered wealth in the way that our indigenous communities consider it, with prayer and spirit, his community, his indigenous language. But no, none of that mattered, right? Because he didn't have what the rich white wealth, grumpy wealth hoarder, disabled guy had. But their union made everything okay.
Oh yeah.
And now they were both so happy.
Yeah, and you know, I really want to talk about how he was shot, because he was shot. You know, the light was bright and beautiful when he was talking about the white disabled guy. Then all of a sudden the light got dark when it was in the home of the black quote-unquote immigrant.
Right.
So I was like, wow, it was so obvious.
Yeah, well.
And I really want to talk about, Tiny, is that the background of the wealthy family, and we realized that the background of the wealthy family had roots in oppressing the African immigrants. So, you know, talk about that, because nobody's really talking like in this new remake.
What's the remake called?
The remake is called Upside with Kevin Hart.
Well, yeah, so again, so that people are clear about this French movie, and it was subtitles, right?
Sure.
Untouchable. I mean, the imprint, really so many layers of that, and I do want to go back to what you just said, Leroy, even down to the gaze, right? The photographic gaze, the filmic gaze. For people who know about film, that's a really, really deep thing, and my mom and me used to critique that in all of these American, movies, but also European movies. The only reason that basically people of color specifically are in Europe as well is because of poverty. You know, they wouldn't be going, I mean, that's across the board, is not always the case. But in many cases, the reason for migration those are the nations that France colonized. So like the Congo, where they have a brutal genocidal history of nothing less than torture of the Congolese people, right? The Republic of Africa, all of these places where indigenous people of the continent were doing just fine, before the French government came in and raped and pillaged and stole and colonized, right? Using oftentimes the African revolutionary known as Jesus to do that, in the same way that the settler colonizer white people did it, and the English, quote unquote, who came to this occupied territory. But the other thing about that is, just like in all these colonized nations, it's so interesting how when folks come to Europe to make it a little bit, because there's a little bit better that they think they can be, they are highly racialized. People think, oh, there's no racism here. Complete BS. Our sister Auntie Frances tells us, who's actually been to Europe, badass that she is, revolutionary poverty scholar of the self-help hunger program in North Oakland, that it's an extreme form of racism that goes on in Western Europe. In Italy, African women are seen as all prostitutes, all sex workers, even if they're not. They're constantly pigeonholed into that. The other thing is that it's very class stratified. So if you're an immigrant and you're in poverty in France, watch out, because you're predated on by police. You are seen as other and less than, and that entire dynamic plays out in that movie, right? Because the wealthy white wealth hoarder was basically nice, right? He was seen as a giving, loving man because he took a chance on the poor immigrant man of color, right? Again, the constant gaze of the film being that the nice, charitable colonizer was taking this risk with this criminalized body, this criminalized black body, which of course he couldn't have survived without the actual really good care this guy as a worker was doing for him, right? But that notion of work, of labor, of agency, of knowledge, of brilliance, completely not there. It was all the slave master reality played out on the big screen, and it was actually frightening. It was like a horror movie for me and Leroy.
Yeah, totally frightening. And now we have Kevin Hart doing the same thing. And I was like, oh my God, when is Hollywood gonna learn?
And when is this story gonna stop? Can we like kill this story? It's like, and I know Leroy, this wasn't on the topic because he's dealing with disability, but I have to bring up the other colonizers, aka the Dutch and the Danes and all those whatevers, and what they did to and what they do to African peoples, but specifically the story of the captain, who was attacked by the scary African Somali pirates and had his ship taken and was put in a raft where he had to be for like 20 days eating only like Somali food, which really is actually really good. But anyway, that part where he was stuck in a raft, oh my God, with black people, no! For 20 days. And he was afraid for his life. Because of course, if they were African people, he was gonna die, right? Anyway, point being is that torturous movie about that pilot of that ship was remade with, what's the dude's name? Tom Hanks! So we had to see it again! Hollywood, we don't like French colonizer movies about black people and white people. Can you just get that message? Can somebody let the industry know? We don't want to see any more of those remakes. Ever. Again. Ever.
I know, and we like I said, we think that black entertainers get their freedom in Paris. James Baldwin and all the jazz and blues singers that go there. But once again, that's the wealth.
Thank you.
The wealth side of it.
Yep.
A lot of black, poor, disabled people that are living in Paris and can't even live in Paris, gotta live outside of Paris, don't even have that access. So, all of that is not brought up in this new movie. And I wanna really pull back on the disability movement, because they only criticize is that all the main character is not disabled. They don't go deep into the race and the class issue of the movie.
Exactly.
And it's really missing what the critique of it. So,
the Kevin Hart. And so now let's fast forward to what we're talking about, the launch of this, which is the one in the U.S. now, the remake, which is called again what?
It's called Outside.
Yeah, so this is really important because again, we have this really tired, dumb, like worn out, rich person helping the poor person, maybe, and white person helping the black person, maybe, story being remade. And now it's Kevin Hart and this other dude, I don't know his name, the white dude, and Bryan Cranston. And again, like Leroy talks about the disability piece, as a poverty scholar, as a poor person who struggled my entire life in and out of jail, in and out of shelters and homelessness and all of these pieces, and never got no help from no rich people at all, because rich people don't help you. Now that said, we teach folks with wealth hoarding problems and land stealing problems about the notion of radical redistribution. And any of y'all can come to People School on January 26th, because that's when the next one is. But the reality is that story of the poor, broken, broke down ghetto scholar who has, again, no knowledge, no agency, no no survival skills of their own except criminality, right? And the nice white guy, the wealth hoarder guy, saves him, and oh boy, they have so much fun, like playing hip hop together, and the man in color bringing him spirit, right? That story is done. Okay, it's played out. I don't ever want to see it again. And actually, after what's the one with Dickens, the nice old guy who comes back 3 times? What's the Christmas Story or whatever the heck that one's called?
Scrooge.
Right. The Grinch, but also the guy the old white guy in England who comes back and gives the little disabled child the turkey and gets
Santa Claus?
It's one of those stories.
It is the Scrooge story.
Scrooge. Sorry, I thought you said Grinch, because Grinch is a poverty scholar, FYI, like little Zion said. No, Scrooge. But that Scrooge story, that's done. We were done with that in the what I mean, the 20th century, maybe. Like, it was old in the 19th century.
With Richard Pryor.
Right.
And on Silver Street.
Right, exactly. That stuff's over, because guess what? The reason that Poor Magazine came out with the book we're putting out this year, which is so exciting, Poverty Scholarship, Poor People Live, Theater, Art, Words, and Tunes Across Mama Earth, is because we're tired of being talked about us without us. We definitely don't need the rich white people to kick us down a crumb to be okay. So, you know what? This Kevin Hart, Bryan Cranston movie, don't see it.
Don't see it. It's interesting. I'll stop here after this. That Bryan Cranston, was acting beside a disabled character in Breaking Bad. So he should know better. His son in Breaking Bad was a person that had CP, cerebral palsy, a real actor. So once again, it tells you that, money speaks and nothing else matters. So anyway, that's Krip Hop Nation. We broke it down. Outside the movie, please don't go see it. Don't waste your money, don't waste your time. But you can also give us the money so we can do some real movies right here on Poor Magazine.
Right.
KEXU 96.1 FM. Thank you, everybody. That's Krip Hop Nation. Get the textbook coming out in February. February 10th at City Light Bookstore in San Francisco. Peace.
A sweet day, I will see you again.